I think the main benefit that I can see is that the story time gives bridges and things that make it easier for a child that's on the spectrum to track the story and to relax and know what's going to be happening in terms of the sequence of events. Some children get overly tense if not knowing what's going to be taking place. So we make it real clear that there's a beginning, middle, and an end. Also, it's a good environment in that the parents all understand that maybe there's some children that will have special needs or behavioral problems. And if there's any acting out on the part of the child, it's not bad parenting and everything like that. It's just that this child has a special need.
Hello and welcome to our first of 4 modules to support creating an inclusive storytime at a public library. The first module, Module 1, is focused on celebrating all abilities. This module will assist you in understanding the importance of having inclusive storytimes at your library, as well as the concept of equity and access for all children and individuals with differences. Hello, my name is Janice Battaglia. I'm the manager of the Inclusion Collaborative. I have included my contact information should you have any questions that arise as we go through the 4 modules on inclusive storytime. I look forward to being your facilitator today for Module 1, Creating Inclusive Library Storytimes, Celebrating All Abilities. The information that I'll be bringing to you today and your team is how to understand inclusive storytime, what it is and what it is not. My hope is that for you to have a clear understanding of the purpose and benefits of inclusive storytimes for the children and families with whom you work. By the end of this module, you will have an understanding of your own attitudes of individuals with disabilities or differences, knowing that we all have unique needs and similarities to each other. You will gain a deeper understanding of the similarities that we all share, as well as the needs we all have in different ways. You will be able to understand that we as individuals have needs rather than challenges. When our needs are met, we are able to participate in any activity, including story times. Before we get started, I'm going to share a little information about the Inclusion Collaborative housed at the Santa Clara County Office of Education in San José, California. The Inclusion Collaborative of Santa Clara County is committed to ensuring that children with and without disabilities and special needs have equal access to full participation in inclusive learning and community settings. The Inclusion Collaborative is about equity and access for all. It's really part of social justice for all. The Inclusion Collaborative understands and actively supports the inclusion of children with special needs and disabilities in our community. That is our vision. We have 4 strategic areas that we focus on in order to be aligned with our vision and our mission. Our strategic plan includes goals and outcomes in these 4 areas. The Inclusion Collaborative provides a variety of services in Santa Clara County. The 4 strategic areas of services are advocacy and access, screening and assessment coordination, professional development, and inclusion support. The professional development that you will participate in today is a demonstration of the strategic area of professional development that the Inclusion Collaborative focuses on to support children with disabilities and special needs to have access to the community environments that their peers without disabilities have access to. We have found that in order for children with disabilities and special needs to have access to community environments, supports may be needed. It is for this reason we have created several supports to this end. Later in this module, I will share with you some supports that you will find useful and as well in this module as well as in future modules. We have had the pleasure to provide trainings for several libraries in our surrounding counties so that they could offer inclusive story times at their libraries. These other libraries include San Jose, San Mateo, Santa Cruz, Monterey, and Contra Costa. We've also done trainings at the Santa Clara County Office of Education Library summer camps on including children with special needs in story times at the school district library programs. We are excited about this current set of training modules, which will be used to train new staff as they enter the City of San Jose library system, as well as support and ensure that other libraries around the state will have information that will assist them to provide inclusive story times at their respective libraries. Now let's get started and learn a little bit more about inclusive story time. Inclusive story time provides an opportunity for children with and without disabilities to interact and learn from each other in a supportive setting. Please know that when we refer to all children, this is inclusive of children with disabilities, special needs, and English language learners. When we say special needs, we mean that these are children that may not have a diagnosis, but may have a need such as a challenging behavior or other need that may not yet be identified. Your story time may be the first group activity that a child has participated in, and the child or family may not know how to participate. The librarian will be able to provide adaptations and modifications at story time that will encourage children with and without disabilities to interact and participate in story times together. Inclusive story times meet the needs of all children. Inclusive story times allow children with disabilities and special needs to participate and engage in the same activities as their peers without disabilities or special needs. It is important for both children with disabilities and their families to feel as though they belong at story time. By providing adaptations and modifications for the children, allow all children to participate at the level in which they are able. Have that sense of belonging. What inclusive story is not? Well, inclusive story is not having a separate time that only individuals with disabilities participate. Inclusive story time is not having a story time without adaptations or modifications when needed. Inclusive story time is not having a separate story time for English language learners. This is not being inclusive. This is actually being exclusive. You must have adaptations and modifications that support the active participation of children, all children, those with disabilities and those without. You may also set up the environment a little differently in order to support children's ability to participate fully as members of the story time. It has been our experience that children and their families who are English learners also benefit from the strategies that are used with children with disabilities or special needs, since most of these strategies provide visual supports that also help English language learners and their families participate as well. Benefits of inclusive story time for children with disabilities. There are many benefits of having an inclusive story time for children with disabilities. Here are a few of them. Children with disabilities have the opportunity to develop friendships, have increased opportunities for social interactions, to build relationships, and to build their own support networks. Children with disabilities also have peer models for appropriate social and behavior skills. They have access to other adults besides their parents reading to them, as well as practice being in groups. There are opportunities for the parents to participate as well and meet other parents who have similar needs. Parents who have children with disabilities are sometimes isolated. Having opportunities for inclusive story times allow the parents to be more integrated into the community as well. As you can see, there are many benefits of inclusive story time for children with disabilities and their family. These are just a few of the benefits. I'm sure you can think of others as well. Benefits of inclusive story time for children without disabilities. Just as there are benefits for children with disabilities, there are also several benefits for children without disabilities. Here are a few that may be obvious and are worth listing. Children without disabilities will develop the meaningful relationships with children with disabilities. They will have increased appreciation and acceptance of individual differences and acceptance of diversity. Increased respect for all people. They have a greater development of empathy, They have opportunities to practice and master activities by actually teaching those activities to others, which lead to greater academic outcomes, and their needs are better met as there are greater resources and supports for everyone. It even supports the reduction of bullying. After all, our children now will be our future doctors, lawyers, politicians, grocery clerks, librarians, teachers, as well as many other occupations. We want to make sure that they learn the empathy that will support us all as we age as well. Take a few minutes to listen to what some of the parents and librarians have found to be beneficial to them when they have participated or facilitated inclusive story times at the library.
I like it because it introduces the vocabulary with cards and images, and every single activity is introduced. It's not just like going on. They know what they're going to do. Since I don't take her to a daycare yet or a preschool, it helps me to teach her how it's going to be like to be in a circle time and following instructions and learning to share and paying attention. She's more patient, and she pays attention, she can follow instructions, and she loves to read, and she knows more words. We speak Spanish at home, and I read books in English and in Spanish, so when we come here and we go back home, she repeats the words she had learned.
I think the benefits of an inclusive story time include with the visible structure of inclusive story time, there creates a familiarity and a comfort among the families. Another benefit is a quieter and slower pace, makes the story time more accessible and beneficial for all children.
The benefits of inclusive story time are varied. One that comes to mind is the fact that typically developing children and children on the autism spectrum can coexist together in a story time without fear.
We are participating and we spend time together. He started sharing and he likes to be here and enjoy the music because he really likes music.
This is the first social class for him, so he is learning how to participate. And he's learning how to react to the others. He can focus on the class.
As you can see, there are many benefits for inclusive story time. These are just a few for children with disabilities. I am sure you can think of others as well. Take a minute to look through these. It's exciting to see the benefits of inclusive story time. And think of all the benefits you will have as the librarian in supporting these inclusive story times too. There'll be many benefits for you as you'll learn new skills and opportunities to meet new people. The San José Public Library has developed standards for all of the librarians within their branches. Each library branch must include an inclusive story time at a minimum monthly. In order to provide continuous quality improvement, they also provide a survey to their families quarterly. They then review these surveys to make improvements to ensure that they are meeting the needs of all the children and their families at that branch. In addition, all librarians are expected to use some components of their inclusive story times at all of their other story times. As I have observed, many of these strategies are effective for all children and support the librarians to be successful as well. I'm sure you will learn this too as you go along. You may be asking yourself, why should you do inclusive story time? Well, it's really about social justice, equity, and equal access. And if you look at the library's mission, you can see that it's really important for every member of the community to have access to all the different ideas and information that's available to the public. It's really within the values of the San José Public Library to ensure that there is a well-trained and highly capable staff that reflects the city's diversity in order to work together to provide quality services for all of their users. The State Library wants to be valued by all. In order to be valued by all, they have to support the access to their libraries by all. So not only individual branches, but the State Library aligns with the supporting the accessibility for everyone in order to succeed and build a stronger California. So you're part of that process. What is your library's mission, vision, and values? Do they include accessibility for all? If not, they should. It may be something that you might want to think about in terms of developing or re-looking at your own library's mission, vision, and values so that they do align with accessibility for all and equity for all individuals in your county or city. Looking at inclusive storytime, how does it really look? Here are a few pictures of Ed doing some inclusive storytime. You could see that he has, in the first picture, there's an arrow pointing to the expectations, and these are visual pictures of the expectations that he has that he goes over each time with each group that he has that comes to story time. The second arrow is pointing to the schedule of the story time. So what activities go in what order? So children will know what activity will be coming next and when that activity will be ending. So it's not a surprise. It really helps children to plan. And you could see at the very bottom of that row, there's actually an envelope that supports putting the icon or the picture when it's all done in that envelope so the student knows, the child knows what's coming up next. And in the third picture, you'll see the arrow is pointing to a book that has been adapted. This book has been adapted to have pictures that help the child to interact with the book. So it really engages the audience and the children to participate in inclusive story time. So I will discuss this in more detail in Module 3 and 4 in terms of what inclusive story time looks like. So you say, how does this work? How does inclusive story time work? Well, you need to make sure you have advertised once you decide you want to do inclusive story time. Here is an example of one of the flyers that was created to advertise inclusive story time for the City of San Jose Libraries. You can also advertise by including the dates and times of inclusive story time on the monthly calendars on your website. Some libraries include this as a flyer on monthly calendars that they distribute at the library. And some of the libraries also created a bookmark that was given out at all of the story times that explained a little bit about what inclusive story time was so that families could choose to come during those specific times or during the general story times. What else needs to happen for story time? Well, the environment needs to be set up prior to you starting the story time. You need to create adaptations for story time and always be ready with all the materials. You may have to adjust your attitude and understanding of individuals with disabilities as well, and that's what we will focus on during the remainder of this module. What can you expect? Well, first of all, you're going to actually probably have smaller groups. Many of the librarians, when they first started inclusive story time, thought there would be lots of children with disabilities at their inclusive story times, but that is usually not the case. Often the inclusive story times have less children. You have few children with disabilities, and they are in smaller numbers. Usually only about 10% or less of the children that are in your inclusive story time actually have disabilities. So say in a group of 20, you may only have 1 or 2 children with a disability and all the other children are participating in your group just as you do all your other groups. And you will do much like what you usually do in your regular story times. You will hold a story time just like you do. You may need to go a little bit slower. You may need to show some visual supports. And I will go into more depth and detail during modules 3 and 4. Now we're going to focus on how we can understand and celebrate all of our abilities and needs. Here for your reference, you'll have handout number 1. If you would like some additional information on person-first terminology and information on the disabled, this handout provides this in greater detail than we go into on this portion of the module. Did you know that the disabled are actually the largest minority group? They are the largest and most inclusive minority group that we have. Disabilities affect both genders, are across all age levels, religions. It spares no ethnic backgrounds or socioeconomic levels. Disabilities can affect everyone at one time or another. It's actually the only group that spares no one, and anyone can enter that group at any time. Even though it's the largest minority, it still has many areas in common with other minorities. Societal misunderstandings, prejudice, and discrimination are all part of this minority group. So take a minute to do this activity with me. Take a separate piece of paper that's on your table or where you're sitting and write down any of the stereotypical phrases that you may hear about individuals with disabilities. Go ahead and write down all those names that you yourself may never say, but you may have heard others say, like dumb, stupid, retarded. Go ahead, write them all down. I'll give you a minute to do this. The individuals with disability are often thought of as people who suffer from the tragedy of birth defects. Those veterans who return from defending our country are paraplegic heroes who struggle to become normal again. They are victims who fight to overcome their challenges, often very dramatic and really pulling on the sympathy of others. But who are they really? They are really everyone we may know at one time or another. They're our moms, our dads, possibly our wives, our husbands, our sons, our daughters, our children, our grandchildren. They may be students or teachers or leaders or followers, politicians, doctors, lawyers. They are just regular people just like you and I. The disabled community can be joined by any of us at any one time or another. It could be through birth, through an accident, through an illness, or through the inevitable aging process. 1 in 5 of us can expect to join this minority in some time in our life. Think of 5 of your friends or family members. Have you thought of them? Do you have their faces in your mind? One of them will join the disabled community at some time in your lifetime. How would you want to be treated if it was you? Or how do you want someone to view or describe you or your loved one? Think about it. Now take that piece of paper that you wrote down all those stereotypical words that you hear others call individuals with disabilities and rip it up. You do not want to hear someone talk to you or a loved one like that. So let's get rid of it and tear it up. The way we can break through stereotypes are by using the power of words acknowledging the whole person as a person first rather than their disability, developing empathy for individuals that have various needs, and by understanding the specific disabilities through simulations and activities that can really understand and have more empathy for a person in a more personal manner. First, let's talk about the power of words. One can find that words can be really powerful and hurtful. I am sure that you have heard the whole saying that how words can perpetuate the stereotypical perception that people with disabilities are all one homogeneous group and are pitiful and needy people. Or words can model acceptance and respect for individuals with disabilities. What would you choose for yourself, for your families, or for your friends? Here for your reference is handout number 2. It's actually a bookmark that gives you some reminders on how to use person-first terminology that you can use to share with your colleagues, staff members, and the community so they have more appropriate words when talking about children with disabilities. Remember, it's the child first and their disability second. Remember to look at the whole person. A disability is only one aspect of an individual. All people have a variety of abilities, interests, hopes, dreams, aspirations, and needs. People with disabilities have both similarities and differences with those people who do not have disabilities. We are more alike than we are different. I want you to introduce you to my friend Ryan. He's currently in middle school. You'll see that Ryan enjoys drawing pictures of Dr. Seuss books. He's an actor and has starred in many plays. He's actually on a baseball team and loves to play baseball. He's an expert speller and enjoys math. He's also a big brother. Ryan also has autism. So you could see he is a child with autism or a student with autism. As you can see, Ryan is a whole person. He's a child first who enjoys doing similar things to other children without disabilities. He has a variety of characteristics, and that's why we say he is a child or a student with autism. Autism is only one characteristic, one of his characteristics. And now you'll see the opposite with this next flower. This is a representation of how an autistic child might be seen. In this picture, Ryan is only seen by his disability. Non-person-first terminology perpetuates the stereotypes and myths about people with disabilities. Using person-first terminology shows acceptance and respect for the whole person. So you could see an autistic child, you're just thinking of Ryan as being autistic, not with all the other attributes he actually has. Please add your voice to the Inclusion Collaborative to start a wave of respectful language here in our community and beyond. And you'll see that there's a website that you can go to sign your pledge of respect for person-first terminology. You just put your name and your agency, and we can add you to that list. Currently, we have almost 700 people that are part of that list. So we're excited about having you join as well. And I've also added a handout that you can see with the pledge of respect. So if you want to have other people at your library sign that, they can as well. And this is what you'll say. I pledge to place the student first before the disability, place groups of students before the disability, use respectful terms when referring to a peer group, model back person-first terminology when others do not use it, inform others about person-first terminology. And just remember, it's been for me as well as other colleagues of mine that changing the way we speak is really a process and takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. Even though you have the intent, sometimes it just slips out. Think about ways to create an agency policy, or within your department you can support person-first terminology at your branch, department, or with the families with whom you work. In our county, we have over 40 agencies that have signed the pledge and several agencies who have implemented a policy within their agency. I can share with you what we have done in Santa Clara County Office of Education. We created a policy so that all of our staff, upon entering our system or being hired, sign a pledge of respect. We have a mini training on using person-first terminology. In addition, we have a written policy in our communication style guide that all written materials will use person-first terminology. On handout 4 is a copy of the agency policy pledge that you can use to encourage your library to sign and create a person-first terminology policy. For additional resources and samples of agency policies, you can go to the link on this slide to view additional information and samples of other policies around the county. Please pause this module to print and review this handout. 4A, 10 tips for communicating with people with disabilities. This refers to communicating with adults, but also reflects how you would communicate with children. At times, you may find that a parent of a child in your group may have a disability. These are some general tips. Always speak directly to the person. Shake hands or greet the person with a disability just as you would greet others. Make eye contact or verbally identify yourself if you're greeting a person with a visual disability. Treat adults as adults. Talk as you would to your peers. Respect the individual's equipment or service dog. If you would like to pet the dog, always ask first. Listen attentively. If you don't understand, ask the person to repeat what was said. Eye level. If a person is in a wheelchair, get at their eye level when communicating with them. When approaching or communicating a person who may not see or hear you approaching, tap the person or verbally let them know you are there. And most of all, relax and act yourself around the person with a disability. Remember to always treat others as you would want to be treated. For additional information, please refer to this document. As you're reading and reviewing this handout, reflect on your own personal experiences as well as those of your colleague. This may be something that you would want to share with your colleagues as well. Digging a little deeper. Make sure you're using person-first terminology throughout your library and the programs that your library promotes. Consider how you and your colleagues are using the 10 tips for communicating with people with disabilities. It is important that everyone feels welcomed and has a sense that they belong at the library, no matter what their needs are. Check to make sure that all of your documents reflect respectful language and person-first terminology. Examine and review your flyers, your marketing materials, your workshops or trainings, your story times, your library website, and the materials that you post on the website, the language you use as you assist and talk to your library patrons and children. If you have items posted within your library, check to make sure those are also using person-first terminology. And as you give directions to others, do these all reflect person-first terminology? You may want to check. Of course, this list is not all-inclusive. Are there other items that I may have forgotten that you may need to check on back at your library? Are there missing items? Take a minute to reflect on this. Were you able to add to this list? If so, what did you add? Write these down so you will remember, and you can add this to your own personal action plan later in this module. Here is a sample of a goal that is written at the Santa Clara County Office of Education and the policy developed in our communication style guide. One of our county office goals is to improve student equity and reduce access discrepancies to high-quality education. One way that we are beginning that process is through the language that is used throughout our office. Our communication style guide indicates that all written materials will use person-first terminology. Our policy reads, "In writing or in speech, place the person ahead of the label." Then there are examples of what this means. A child with a disability, a student with autism, students with Down syndrome, a family with a child with a physical disability, etc. What are your library goals, and how can you incorporate this into them? For a minute, think about other guidelines or goals or respectful rules that you already have in place at your library to influence how you or other staff communicate or interact with people with disabilities. Are these goals, guidelines, or rules being used consistently within your library? Do they need to be revised to reflect person-first terminology? Do they already support person-first terminology? Take a few minutes to look at these, or you may want to think about exploring this as one of your action plans if you're not sure. How can you use person-first terminology or your other guidelines and rules at your library to ensure that individuals, children or adults with disabilities and their families, feel welcomed and have that sense of belonging? Does anything need to be modified in order to reflect this? Think about this quote from Mark Twain as you begin to use person-first language. The difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and the lightning bug. Words can hurt others and change how one feels about themselves as well as others. Remember to take a minute to think before you speak. How are the words I'm using going to affect others? Am I using person-first terminology? So we're going to have a little activity about who has limitations, because there's a myth that only people with disabilities have limitations or challenges. So if the statement I read describes you, raise your hand, or if there's more than one statement that describes you, put a finger up. Count how many times you can put your finger up. All right, here goes. If you have trouble remembering your schedule and appointments, or need to use a written planner or electronic day planner, raise a hand or put your finger up. If you wear glasses, contact lenses, or need to use a magnifying glass, go ahead and put your finger up. If you have difficulty reading a road map or following directions, put your finger up. Have difficulty maneuvering your car, like parking or backing up, put your finger up. Difficulty hearing someone speak in a crowd or room when there's background noise, put your finger up. Have difficulty navigating on their computer or with electronic equipment, put your finger up. How many fingers did you put up? One or more times during this activity? As you can see, not just individuals with a disability has limitations and challenges. We all do. Limitations should not be looked at as problems. They actually reflect a need. So if we apply this to the children you work with in story time, a child does not have a problem seeing. He or she just needs glasses. Children do not have a problem behavior. He or she just needs behavior supports. A child does not have a problem walking. He or she might just need a wheelchair. Think about a disability as a need. We need to shift our thinking from challenge or limitation to a need that a person has. This is an activity that you can do with others as well. It also works well to do in a large group and in a large room. You can actually have people move into different parts of the room when you state one of the limitations or challenges. I had you raise your hand or finger in order for you to participate in this activity as you're watching this PowerPoint. So think about doing that with other partners at your library. Remember, students with disabilities are not the only ones who use visual supports. Think about all the visual supports we use every day. I know that I could not live without my calendar or my personal computer. I would never know what to do or where I need to be. How about you? Now here are some of the visual supports that you can see we use in our community. There's the stop signs, there's road signs, sticky notes. Even the grocery store, there's always lines and arrows to show where you need to line up. So you can see visual supports are used throughout our community. Fairness. Remember, fairness is not about having each child do the same thing the same way as everybody else. Fairness is really about making sure that everyone has their needs met. I know this may come up sometimes at Inclusive Storytime, so here's an example you may be able to relate to. It's okay for a child to sit in a chair at Storytime instead of on the floor because that's what the child needs to be successful at Storytime. Really thinking of it as a need makes you understand what is really fair. Take a minute to think and draw your flower of abilities. Draw a flower on a piece of paper and include your interests, your abilities, your challenges and limitations or needs that you have. For example, I enjoy knitting. I'm good at arts and crafts, but I also need the glasses to read the directions on how to do the knitting. I also need to have a calendar to know what I'm going to do on a daily basis. And I also need a GPS for directions. How about you? Take a minute and think about your flower of abilities. So this activity you can do with parents as well. I've had a set of parents that we had make their own flower about their child rather than about themselves. And they actually had a hard time finding all the things that were positive things that their child does. So it's really impactful for you to do this activity with both parents and colleagues. Ability Support Kits, or ASK. This is a resource that we call the Ability Support Kit that you can use to support celebrating all abilities at your library. Here is some of the information on the tool of the Ability Support Kit that you can use to do an ability awareness activity at your program. This kit includes a training binder, teacher and children books, videos, handouts, and materials for various simulations of different disabilities. And all of the contents are actually listed on the handout number 5. Many of the activities and information shared with you today can be duplicated using the Ability Support Kit. This is a resource that is available for checkout at the Santa Clara County Office of Education Multimedia Center. You can also share this module with your partners at the library and your colleagues, so they will have the same information as well. Remember, what you practice is what you preach, and you impact the attitudes of others. Our attitude toward life determines life's attitude towards us. Bright ideas to share. Handout 6 is a bright idea sheet. Go ahead and print that out and take a minute to reflect on the information that I have shared in this first module. What can you do now at your library? What can you change about your own attitude? What can you share with other staff? Take a minute and write down the actions or steps that you will take to make changes right away. It's okay to take little steps, remembering that this is a process for you and for the staff and families with whom you work. Here are some additional online references for you to access if you would like any additional information. Also, here are some additional resources for you as well. Let's take a break for now before we go to Module 2. Module 2 will focus on creating inclusive library story times and understanding facts and implications about selected disabilities. So I look forward to talking with you again.